Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's class, Sketching the Moon in Graphite. I'm your instructor, Adrienne Hodge, and I'm so excited to join you tonight to sketch the moon. So tonight's class is a bit of a part one for a class next week on painting the moon using ink. And you can sign up for next week's class in the same spot that you signed up for tonight's class on the Michaels website. And I did not grab the example, but it is a lovely painting of the moon in green monochrome ink. And you can see that class advertised on the Michaels website where you signed up for this one. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and switch to my tabletop view and we'll go over supplies and get started tonight. Okay, so don't forget to tag your work with the hashtags Make It With Michaels or Michaels Classes. You can also tag at Learn With Michaels or follow Learn With Michaels on Instagram as well. And you can follow me on Instagram at Adrienne Hodge Art. I am also on Facebook, Adrienne Hodge Fine Art, if you're able to read that on my business card there. And if you can't tell by looking at my business cards, I am into astronomy. So it's really fun to be sketching the moon tonight because I'm a big lunar nerd and I've got a lot of fun stuff I want to geek out about tonight as we draw the moon using these lunar maps that I included. So get to those in just a second, but we have a very simple supply list tonight. So we are just using a sketchbook and you can get by this entire class tonight using just one pencil. And I sketched this sketch of the moon using this Faber-Castell Jumbo 2B pencil. That's all that I used. And that came in a kit with several Faber-Castell graphite materials, including this dust-free eraser and a few different 2B pencils, and then a woodless graphite pencil, which we may use a little bit, or I advise that you might use for some of these darker values. One issue that I have whenever I use graphite on Zoom is sometimes my lines do not show up very well. So I'm actually going to be using a darker B pencil for most of my sketching tonight. But you use whatever pencils you have handy. I do recommend that you use some kind of a B pencil. And I'll tell you why I love this jumbo pencil in just a bit. And I may get started with this one, but I'm probably going to switch to just this heavier 6B out of this Winsor Newton set that I got at Michael's, and mostly just so my lines will show up. As those of you know who join me for these classes all the time, I like to start out drawing nice and light. And those lines are just not going to show up on the Zoom very well unless I use a darker pencil. So that's what I'll be doing. Okay, so pretty simple supply list, just some soft B pencils and a sketchbook. Even just one B pencil will get you through the whole class, and an eraser. One unofficial thing that I didn't put on the supply list that you might want to have handy is maybe some tape, or maybe a cup or a bowl or something that is circular that you could use to trace the circle of the moon. I am going to use this little dish here. I think I used, what did I use last time? I guess I thought I used this, but my moon is a little bit bigger than that. So yeah, just to make it a little easier, I'm going to talk about how to sketch a circle without the use of tracing. But if you're just really struggling and you want to use some tape or a cup or something, then that would be good. Okay, so one unofficial item on the supply list there. Okay, and oh, and then yeah, the reference images. So I included these documents that are government documents from NASA, so they're available for us to use here. And it looks like our lovely moderator just dropped those in the chat for you if you don't have them, these handouts. So these handouts have these lunar maps, and I may not be able to quite get mine to show up on the Zoom really well here, but you have them. And if you are watching later on YouTube, you can click where it says see more at the bottom of the description under the YouTube video, and those handouts will be there for you to download as well. So we've got two different maps here, and they just break down the different seas and craters, some of the more prominent seas and craters on the moon, so that we can make some little studies here. So I've got as seen from the northern hemisphere and then the southern hemisphere, and these are from these images, I believe, are, well, this document was created in October 2023. I don't know exactly when these photographs were taken, but we also have so we've got those. And then we also have one more handout. Just toggle over to that real quick. I've got it in a separate place. So we also have this NASA image of the moon from 2017, I believe, that we're going to be using to sketch our full moon. So, all right. We're going to start out, though, just breaking down these different prominent craters and lunar Maria or seas here, these lunar seas. They have such beautiful names. Okay, so I think that was the first one. Yep, that's the first one. All right, so first of all, let's open one of those. Let me toggle back over to it. I had to save them to a different place on my iPad here. Okay, so let's look at the one that is labeled. Sorry, I'm just double checking. Like, is it the northern or the southern one where we're starting here? We're looking at the Tycho crater. Oops. Let's see, it looks like it's going to be the one that's labeled. Which one is it, y'all? Is it the northern or the southern one? I guess I keep opening the wrong one. I'm looking at both of them and I don't see these craters labeled. It has to be in these documents. Y'all tell me if you see them in the chat where I'm missing it. Otherwise, we'll just look at the photograph of the moon and we'll figure it out here. Maybe I'm just not scrolling over far enough in both of them. Okay, we are going to use just the photograph of the moon to map these out. We're just going to look at a few of them, just at the more prominent ones. Okay, so but before we do that, I'm getting way ahead of myself here. Before we do that, I want to talk about just sketching a circle and a few little tricks here for sketching a circle, and also something that will help us to make this look three-dimensional even as we're mapping it out here. All right, so I'm going to use a fresh sketchbook page here, and like I said, I'm using a darker pencil, so my lines will show up, but you should use a lighter pencil for this. And I'm just going to do a quick little tutorial on trying to make a flat circle look three-dimensional using contour lines and value. And if this is new to you, you can check out a class that we had a while back that was a refresher of the very first class that I ever did for Michael's almost 3 years ago. And it was on a beginner's guide to graphite and drawing three-dimensional forms. And I believe Rashmi can drop that in the chat there for you. Yep. And if you're watching later on YouTube, you can just search those keywords that I just said. And basically, it's really difficult to draw a perfect circle the first time that you try. And especially if you are holding your pencil the way that, if you're holding your pencil like this, where the pencil is pointed at the front of the paper, it's really difficult to draw a perfect circle the first time. But if you hold your pencil back towards the back of the pencil and have it parallel to the paper so the pencil is on its side, then you can get a nice light line to happen, and you maybe won't even see my lines yet, but I'm just sketching around and I'm trying to find a perfect circle going nice and light like this. And like I said, that beginner's guide to graphite class goes into this in more depth and really helps you to master how you're holding your pencil so that you can get the most out of your graphite pencils. And if you're just really like, I can't draw a circle right now, it's not happening, then that's when you can take out your tape or your bowl or dish or whatever is shaped like a circle, and you can go ahead and just trace it, because we don't need to spend too much time on that tonight. But once we have our circular shape, we can press down a little harder on our pencil, and a B pencil is best, like that 2B. And the reason why I love this jumbo pencil for this is because it's really hard when you have a jumbo pencil like this to hold it the traditional way. So it's a little easier to be able to get those soft lines to happen with that jumbo pencil and to use it on its side like that and to hold it a variety of ways. So that was why I wanted us to use that pencil. But again, I was just worried about my lines not showing up on the Zoom, so that's why I wanted to use the other one. But it's working pretty good right now, so I'm gonna stick to it since that's the one I planned the class around. All right, so you can see the more I kind of whip my hand around using the movement coming from my whole arm. So the movement is not coming from my wrist, it's my entire arm. I can get that circular shape to happen. All right, and then thinking about the contour lines. So I've got another class where we spent a lot of time on this recently, and it was on understanding contour lines and drawing three-dimensional forms. And Rashmi can drop the link to that in the chat, or if you're watching later on YouTube, you can look up the keywords I just said if this is also new to you. But the idea when we're trying to make a two-dimensional circle look three-dimensional is we want to get all of the information that we're putting on here tonight. We want to get it to follow a three-dimensional curve. So we want to think about the letter C or wrapping around our circle, and then we want to think about that letter C wrapping all the way around from all angles. So from every angle, we want a curved line. We want to think about these contour lines. So just the same as a ball of yarn, the yarn is curving all the way around at an angle. So if we have flat information on our two-dimensional plane, then it's going to read flat. The viewer is going to think that they're looking at something flat. So as we're adding these craters and these C's, these shapes that we're going to talk about, we want to make sure that they are following a three-dimensional curve all the way around. So just like the ball of yarn. So as we add them, we're going to think about them curving in a three-dimensional way. So I'm just going to sketch one of the big craters here, the Tico crater that we're going to talk about a little more in just a second, and see how I'm making sure that as I'm adding that information, it's following this three-dimensional curve so that it feels rounded. And if that is all brand new to you, like I said, then you can refer back to that class on understanding 3D forms and sketching contour lines. And we used a lime for that. And there's reference images for that class as well that will help you to sketch the 3 dimensions of that lime. All right, so moving on, that's the basic concept that I want us to apply as we're sketching all of these different lunar maps here. So I'm going to flip to a new page. And for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and trace my circle. And I'm like wondering, what did I use before? Because it wasn't that dish. I thought it was that dish. Oh, here we go. I've got this receipt tape. This vintage receipt tape. It's nice and it's a little bigger than my dish. That's what I'm going to use. All right, just to get the job done nice and quick and to make sure we're working with a nice circle each time. There's no harm in having a little help from some vintage receipt tape or a cup or a bowl or whatever you have nearby. All right, so we're just going to look at our photograph of the moon. Like I said here, oops, that's not the passcode. Okay, so we're just looking at that NASA image of the moon, and we're just going to identify some of the lunar craters here. So these are just the most prominent lunar craters that jump out to me when I'm drawing the moon. And I love drawing the moon, y'all. I've made a joke years ago that my goal in life is to draw and paint 1,000 moons. And every time I do it, I think there's another drop in that bucket of 1,000. I don't know what I'm up to by now, but I do love to sketch the moon, and it's usually the full moon. Okay, so if you're not familiar with that big crater that is, usually it appears at the bottom of the moon for us in the northern hemisphere, and then in the southern hemisphere it appears at the top. So that's a fun thing that you can note between those two lunar maps that I sent you, that I included here. All right, so the way we want to, we're just mapping it out. We're just noticing where all these things are as little maps. So we're going to start with a little circle down here. So it's going to feel like a little olive pit, and it's a little bit off to the left from the center on the bottom here of our circle. Okay, and then we're just going to do a little double line inside of there. And that's honestly not necessary, but we'll just do it for now. But we are going to add it whenever we add all our value and our shading in a bit. Okay, and then we're just going to do some fiery little bursts coming out of it off to the all around it. And they don't have to be, let me draw them a little darker here so they show up. They don't have to all touch. We're just getting the vague idea, just the sketchy little map of the Tico crater here. And then we've got all these lines coming off of it that spray out in a way that radiate across the bottom of the moon for us. So we're going to have something like that. if we're looking for just this basic idea of the symbol of the Tycho crater, named after the astronomer Tycho Brahe. And you can add more of it if you'd like, but we're just mapping it out. Okay, and then we'll label that one. That's the Tycho crater, Tycho. And I see a question that Roanne has here. What's the advantage of using the jumbo pencil? So I was saying it really helps to keep your, well, for me, I think the advantage of it is, like I said earlier, it helps to keep you from maybe drawing like this, because it's a little, it makes you want to hold it different ways because it's so big and awkward in your hand. So hopefully you're drawing with the movement coming from your entire arm and not just from your wrist. So in that class that I referenced, we talked all about the intro to graphite and drawing forms. I talked about how the optimal way to hold your graphite pencil is nice and loose and maybe towards the back of the pencil, and use your whole arm to draw with it. And that jumbo pencil really kind of forces you to hold your pencil in a different way. So that's why I like it. So it just helps us keep nice and loose and sketchy for the moon. All right, the other crater that we're going to look at over here, I want to move us along just since we need lots of time to be able to add all the value. So it's still following those contours. We're going to have a little elliptical shape and then another little fiery burst coming off of that. And that is the Stephanus A crater. And again, doesn't really matter for the purposes of drawing to label these. I just think it's cool and helpful to know their names if you're interested. And they have really cool names. And so, all right, that one is sort of over here to the right. It's actually a little bit farther down than I drew it. But the idea I wanted to get across with all these maps is that it's okay if our placement of all of these prominent craters and Maria and seas are not perfect. I've never had anybody, pull out a map when they're looking at my drawing of the moon and be like, oh, you put the Copernicus crater a little too far to the north east there. We're just looking for the main idea, and we're looking to see that they're following the contours. So sketching them separately like this, I think, really helps to see what these most prominent shapes are that we can focus on here. All right, and so, oops, how did my eraser got stuck to the back of my iPad there. All right, so we've got the Stephanus A, and then this one that I just sketched over here to the top right corner. Proclus. I haven't actually said that word out loud. Maybe I should have looked up the pronunciation of some of these. All right, and then in the almost directly in the middle here in this photo, we've got the Plato crater. So that one just looks like a big blemish here. It doesn't have the same radiating lines coming off of it. So we can sketch just a black hole there. But again, we want to make it feel like it's hugging these contours. And then there's a couple of them over here on the left. But we're just going to focus on the big one, which is the Copernicus crater. So it's sort of just to the left and above the Tycho crater. And again, these do not have to be perfect. We're just looking for the main idea, understanding of where these are. You could even focus on different ones if they jump out at you, but these are the ones that jump out at me the most. All right, so we have some lunar craters. These are definitely not all of them. All right, so that's our first little diagram that I wanted us to do. Right, we're gonna go to the next page and we're gonna sketch some of the lunar Marias from the Northern Hemisphere handout that I gave you. And we don't necessarily have to label all these. I'm gonna try to run through them fairly quickly here. As long as we've got 45 minutes for that longer sketch of the moon, we're good. And we have an hour and a half to this class. So I'm seeing somebody asking me to slow down. And like I said, we're already half an hour in, and I want to give us at least 45 minutes to sketch the moon from start to finish. We're going to go over all of these again as we sketch the moon together. And also there is a recording, so you can always go back to this recording tomorrow and slow it down, pause it, take your time as much as you need. I know not everybody is going to go at the exact same speed, but that's why we record the classes. All right, so I am going to move on to looking at the lunar seas, or the lunar Marias, to use the Latin term. And I'm looking at the handout of the Northern Hemisphere. Okay, so we're just looking at these shapes, and we're just looking at a few of them at a time, again, so we don't get overwhelmed, because I was afraid if we just started sketching the moon from, you know, start to finish like this without breaking down all of these different craters and lunar seas that I want to focus on, that it might get a little more overwhelming. So that's why I wanted to just do these little maps to start out with. And if I'm going too fast for you, then we're just going to go ahead and move on, and you can come back to the recording if you missed something. All right, so I've got my second circle here. We're doing 3 maps total. So we had the one with some craters that we just finished, and then now we're looking at some lunar Marias or seas in the Northern Hemisphere, and then we're going to look at some lunar seas in the Southern Hemisphere handout. I mean, we're always looking at the same side of the moon, by the way. So, you know, the moon is locked into orbit with the Earth. So we are always facing this same side of the moon. And then the back side of the moon that is always facing away from us towards the sun, well, not always towards the sun, but it's always facing away from us since we're locked into that orbit. So if I had, like, where's my eraser here? I'll do a little, I don't know what happened to that eraser. It floated away. But let's say my ball of yarn is the Earth, and this macaroon eraser is the moon. The moon is constantly orbiting us. Well, it's going the same direction, but my hand just got a little stopped. So we're always facing the same side of the moon, but you're seeing it from you're seeing it a little different from the northern and southern hemisphere. It's appears upside down. That Tycho crater appears at the top, and in the northern hemisphere, the Tycho crater appears in the bottom of the moon. So that's the only difference between these diagrams in the northern and southern hemisphere handouts that I gave you, is they're just flipped here. So anyway, we're looking at the image of from the northern hemisphere handout. So it says it right here at the top, northern hemisphere. And we're looking at this shape of the Sea of Cold, or the Mare Frigoris up here. So we're just looking for this organic shape. And those of you who follow along with a lot of my classes know that I love to name organic shapes as something other than what they are. And this one, I feel like it could maybe look like a sleeping dragon. I don't know, maybe a little bit. Like here's the dragon's head and here's the dragon's body. Maybe you're seeing something else in it. But we don't need it to be perfect. It doesn't have to look exactly like this organic shape. We're just looking for something sort of in the ballpark. Again, I doubt anybody is going to take out a picture of the moon and, you know, hold it up to your drawing and be like, you didn't get that organic shape exactly right. This is where I'm going to switch to my darker pencil so I can fill this in quickly here. So we're just looking for this organic shape in the top of our circle or sphere that feels somewhat like the shape that we're seeing in the diagram. And I'm just going to label that one the Sea of Cold. They have such cool names. All right. And then the next one we're going to look at is the Sea of Rains. And that's the one where the Copernicus crater is inside of. And so I'm just, again, looking at that shape, getting somewhere in the ballpark of it. They just look like ink blobs or like a Rorschach test here. This one kind of has a little bit of a heart shape inside of it. It maybe looks like a controller, like a video game controller. But we want to make sure that that shape is hugging the 3 dimensions. So remember following those 3-dimensional curves. And I'm just going to fill it in using the side of my pencil here. And that jumbo pencil, if you've got that one, should make it easy to hold it on its side and fill this in. I'm mostly just using this other pencil since it's a little darker. I don't want it to show up on the zoom. All right, the next one.
Adrian, sorry.
Yes.
So Veena has a question. She's asking if you're doing one final moon or breaking the parts up between a few.
Yeah, we're doing a few different sketches of the moon here, and we're just breaking it down to look at the parts so that we can put it all together in just a bit and draw it all as one. Trying to make it a little easier by breaking it up into multiple sketches. So we started with our sketch of some of the craters. We're going to end up with 4 sketches here. So we've got one that we just did of some of the craters, and then we're looking at some of the lunar seas in one of the handouts, and then we're looking at some of the lunar seas in the other handout, and then we're going to draw it all together once again. So we're going to have 4 sketches all together.
Great, thank you.
Okay. All right, so going back to the diagram here, so we've got the Sea of Rains, that's the one we just drew. And if you want to notice how there are a few different little shapes off to the side, and put some of those in as well. And I'll go over all of this again whenever we draw the final one. I'm just was afraid if we just dove in and did this all together, it might be like, wait, what are you doing? What is that shape? And so this makes it a little easier to break it down this way. Okay, hopefully everybody's on the same page. I feel like I've explained why I'm doing this so many times. Maybe if anybody joins late, you could inform them in the chat why we're breaking it down like this. I'm afraid maybe some of these people are coming in late and then I'm repeating myself a lot. All right, so the next one is the Sea of Serenity. And it has a pretty blobous kind of oval shape to it. I mean, none of them are perfect shapes. They're all organic. So we're just going for a little blob here. Doesn't have any distinct characteristics I can see, but if y'all want to name some for yourself, then you're welcome to do that. And then I'm just looking at some of the little sticky outy moments. And mostly I'm looking at its relationship to the other shapes that we've drawn. So, oh, geez, it actually needed to be a little closer in. So a little bit, pretend we scooched it over here. It's actually right next to the Sea of Rains and it's connected right there. So this was the shape that I just drew. But again, if it's a little bit off, that is totally fine. I doubt it's gonna be that obvious in your drawing. So I'm really just trying to empower you with this, that the moon, though it may seem like a complicated subject matter to get right, as long as we are getting somewhere in the ballpark of these organic shapes and we're putting them on in a way that feels like it's following the three-dimensional curves of the moon, when we're done, we're going to have something that has this visual impact that feels like the way we see the moon. And it's going to feel pretty realistic, even if it's not perfect. Because I know perfectionism is the thing that keeps a lot of people from tackling a lot of different subject matters. All right, the next one is the Sea of Vapors. I feel like I want to say it like I'm in a Tennessee Williams play. We got the vipers. Okay, so that one is right in the middle here of the Sea of Rains and the Sea of Serenity, which we just drew. So it's below it and in the middle. And it's got a lot of little, what feels like islands coming off of it. So it's another little ink splat, nothing too, just a organic little shape there that's hugging those three dimensions. And then we're getting a few little dots and blobs coming off of it. And again, they do not have to be perfect. All right, next one we're going to look at is the Sea of Tranquility. And I'm just going in order as they appear on this handout. This one definitely has a little bit more of a distinct shape to it. So it's got what feels like a flat line that comes up next to the Sea of Serenity. And it kind of has a little bit more of like a continent shape to it. Maybe feels like it's got Florida coming off the bottom of it right there. Or maybe even a little bit like Texas in a few spots. And it kind of looks like a little witch's face off to the side, whatever you want to call it to help you draw it. But if you think about the witch's face, then it kind of feels like it's got maybe a witch's hat at the top. And if you're not seeing this witch shape or whatever I'm calling it, please do not, don't worry about it. It's fine if you don't see the weird shapes that I'm seeing, whatever you have to call it to get it on there and to get it looking somewhat like the shape. And again, the reason why I'm breaking this down this way is that so when we draw it all together, I don't have to do this again. So I'm going to just say, now we're going to draw our Sea of Tranquility shape whenever we get to the final sketch, but we are going to draw them all together again. So hopefully that will help. All right, Sea of Tranquility. All right, and then we'll do one more here. Because for some reason I left off the last one on this diagram because we don't need them all. All right, this one feels like a potato to me. They all feel a little potato-like now that I think about it. Got a little face though when you add that to it. Those little islandy moments. All right, this is the Sea of Crisis. Maybe because it looks like a screaming face. I don't know. I really don't know what the origin is of some of these names, but they are very lovely. Most of them. And yeah, okay. So that is some lunar craters from that Northern Hemisphere handout. And then we're gonna go to a new page and make another circle. You can keep adding these to the same circle if you want. You can even begin drawing your final sketch if you want to get ahead of me. But I'm going to go to my handout. I'm going to try to zip it along here because I just realized we are at the 45-minute mark already. But there's not as many that I wanted to look at in the Southern Hemisphere handout. We're just going to look at 4 or 5 of them here because we already drew the other ones. Sorry, I am getting turned around here. It looks like it's almost the same ones in this handout. I'm starting to wonder if oh my gosh, if I failed to share some other handout that I was looking at when I sketched this. Why does this not appear to have the same ones? Oh, y'all are gonna have to bear with me here. We're gonna go off of my diagram that I already made. All right, so and we'll look at the photograph of the moon again. All right, so we're looking at this shape underneath the sea of, oh my God, which one is that? I'm like, this is why I wanted to break it down. Underneath the Sea of Rains, we've got the Sea of Isles. And it's all connected like this. This isn't even all of them, you know, these are just some of them again. And you can look at the main photograph and it doesn't really matter too much if they're even labeled perfectly. It's just a way I thought would help us break it down here. All right, so we've got a shape that looks like that. That one really feels like a dragon to me as well. And we've got some little circular shapes. So these are, this Sea of Isles is pretty much in the middle, just below where we just drew all those others. The Sea of Isles. Filling that in, and again, you want to follow those contours so that this feels three-dimensional. Okay, and then below that, these are the ones that come up really close to the Tycho crater. Really feels like the Batman symbol here. It's maybe not this low. But again, it's okay if it's not perfect. We just want to get an understanding of these shapes, these organic shapes, and where they fit together in relationship to each other. All right, so this one that really feels like Batman, at least the way I drew it before. Kind of looks like Batman or a bow tie right here. Maybe not so much in the photograph, but I'm looking at these two shapes. They've got a little gap in the middle of them. That is the known sea. And then the sea of clouds. And then we'll just look at two more here. So we're looking at this one that's really pale compared to others. And it's below the Sea of Tranquility. And that is the Sea of Nectar. And then this last one we'll look at is called the Southern Sea, and it's also not that dark. And I should point out that one of the others up here is actually not as dark as it was in the diagram as well. I'm already forgetting what that one was called. The Sea of Cold. So even though we're sketching these shapes and we're filling them in kind of dark like they were in the, like that one was in the diagram, once we start to add our value, we'll take note of how some of these don't actually appear that dark. So we've got the Sea of Nectar there, and then we're looking at all these little kind of pockmark shapes down here that are called the Southern Sea. But they show up pretty pale in comparison the others. And there are so many more. You can Google search lunar maps. I saw a really cool poster that labeled a bunch of them, but the NASA lunar maps were the ones that were easy to share. And maybe there was a third NASA lunar map that I was looking at that I clearly did not include in the handout. But all of these I found on the internet, so there's nothing too hard out there for you to go searching for. Okay, so again, that was just another map of some of the lunar seas. And we're going to move on to our final sketch here. So if you've been sketching your circles on your own and not worrying about them being perfect circles, now might be a good time to go ahead and trace a circle for our final sketch here. And that way we can start with, just a good template for our moon. All right, so this time we're going to really be paying attention to how the dark and light values appear in the photograph of the moon. So I'm looking at that NASA full moon image, and I've set the lunar maps aside. Those were just to help us get a good understanding of the organic shapes of all those seas and craters. And you could, go whole hog here and put every little detailed shape and nuanced crater that you want in your drawing, but having just some of the most prominent ones will definitely make it feel like the moon. And then when we paint it next week in that ink painting, we're going to sketch it again for the ink painting, and we maybe don't need every single detail in there. So I'm just going back in here and pressing down a little harder on my pencil to get my circular shape to show up. We are going to add some background value, so you don't necessarily need to make those lines too dark. All right, so starting out, I'm going to start out with the craters again, because I feel like those really help map it. And this time I'm going to pay a little closer attention to where they are in relationship to each other and try to get it as closely as possible to the photograph. So starting out with that Tycho crater, we want to have enough room for these radiating lines to radiate out to the bottom here. So we almost want like a straight line of white. And we're going to be leaving our paper blank in all the places where the light values are. And we're going to be adding value in between. So we're going to be really focusing on this light gray in all the places where the in between the white space. So we're going to be drawing a little bit of the negative here. So we're leaving those spaces in between blank, and we're looking for those lines that radiate out. I think it's easier to start with the lines that are radiating out. And if you can't see my lines yet, please just be patient with me as I sketch them in nice and light so I can get them looking the way I want them. And then as I start to add the value, it should show up in my drawing a little better. But that's the other reason why we mapped it out like that, because I drew it nice and dark in our map sketch. And so you know what the shape is that I'm sketching, because we already drew it together in the map. And I don't need to press down on my pencil too hard for you to see it here. All right, and then we've got that double shape here, although it's really not a perfect double circle. It's really more of another little radiating sunburst shape coming off of it. And then we'll go in between our circle and that little sunburst shape that we just drew, and we'll very lightly start to add some value inside of there, keeping it nice and soft using the side of our pencil. And that's how that shape is going to start to become visible, is through the value that we're going to add in that space in between. Okay. And then we'll jump up here and go ahead and map in our Copernicus crater. And again, this is, like I said, why I wanted to label them, so that I could say, now we're going to draw the Copernicus crater. And if I had just started with this, y'all would probably be real mad at me and be like, what? What's the Copernicus crater? And that's why we drew it separately like that, again, to hopefully make this process a little easier. There's a method to my madness, y'all, and maybe if you were like, why is she doing this? It makes more sense to you now. Okay, and then we're radiating out from our little potato shape there. And then we're going to leave the potato shape blank, and we're going to add some light value in between. Not too much though, just kind of the vague idea there. And I'm going to go ahead and put the other crater that's next to it, that's not quite, we didn't label it, but it's the other one that's right next to it. And I probably should have left more space over here between these two and the edge, but that's okay. This is why we said it's okay if it's not perfect. We're getting the main idea here. So now I'm going to go ahead and start to put in one of these lunar seas. And it is I have to go back to it's one of the ones we didn't label, but it's the one to the left of the Sea of Rains. So this whole big blobby shape here. I'm just gonna lump it all together this time. So it comes down, and then we've got the Sea of Rains shape. And then somewhere above that is where we had the Plato crater. I'm gonna go ahead and put that in. And mostly I'm just looking at the photograph of the moon, y'all. And I'm just trying not to go too far so that I don't hit the Sea of Serenity. So it's this pretty big region over here. It's a lot of those that we looked at and mapped together. I'm just sketching them all together now, because it's really okay if they're not perfect. I think as long as you've got some space in between them, where you're seeing the space in between, then it should be should look like the moon. All right, and then I'm going to come over here, and I got a little ahead of myself putting that in, but I'm going to go ahead and put the big crater that we looked at, Proclus. I did not look up the pronunciation of it, but it's over here, just to the left of the in between the Sea of Vapors and the Sea of Tranquility is where we want it. So maybe sketch it kind of light, and then you can make sure that you've got room for those lunar seas on either side of it. I still don't think I sketched it far enough over. Maybe I'll go ahead and sketch in the Sea of Vapors right there first. That was the one that looked like, I think I just called it a potato. I mean, and honestly, you could probably leave a lot of these out. Nobody would really notice. All right, and then I've got the Sea of Serenity. And the Sea of Tranquility below that. And the main idea we're looking for here is that we've got this big empty space. Oh my gosh, I think my light has, I've been just looking at my drawing and not looking at the zoom. Yeah, it's not showing up too well on the zoom at the moment. Y'all please just bear with me while I sketch it in. We mapped it all out together for this reason, because this is my ongoing battle with graphite and teaching on Zoom. In theory, it's so good to learn how to draw with these graphite pencils, right? But in practice, it's really hard because y'all can't see my lines until I start to darken them up. So yeah, the mapping it out was a way to hopefully hold your hand a little bit, even though I can't make my drawing visible until I start to add that value. So I'm doing my best to go as quickly as possible. Once I start filling it in darker, you will be able to see my lines, I promise. But I'm sketching these shapes. These are the shapes that I'm drawing. We drew them so slowly together. So you should be okay. Hopefully you can go back to your map and you can see the shape that you drew, and that can guide you even though you can't exactly see my drawing as you go. We can't have it all. We can't have it all on Zoom. If y'all figure out how to have it all, please let me know. Okay. Okay. And then we've got all these little shapes. So I'm just sketching in all of those shapes that we drew together and made them nice and dark. I'm just sketching them in lightly. And then once we start adding the value, all of my lines will darken up. So I am just looking at the photograph of the moon, and I'm sketching all these organic shapes of the seas and the craters that we went slowly together and sketched and mapped out for the first 45 minutes of the class. I'm just drawing them again. And like I said, this was why I went so slowly and step by step before, so that I could sketch it in again. Okay, without it being hopefully too confusing. All right, there was one more that we didn't label, this circle over here that I feel like is worth including, this big circular shape. I'm gonna put that in over there as well. All right, so now I'm gonna start adding some value, and all of my drawings should be a little more visible as I add the value here. And you can continue going with your 2B pencil, but I'm gonna stick to this darker 6B pencil so that my value will show up a little faster. And I'm looking at the darkest areas first, and I'm putting more pressure in the areas where I see dark value. I'm starting here in this lower corner on the left, and I'm using nice little circular soft tonal value. And if you're unfamiliar with tonal value, you can check out that beginner's guide to graphite class that we linked earlier on in tonight's class. And then as I come up next to these craters, I'm gonna leave it blank. So I'm kind of going inside of those radiating lines. And I'm gonna put my camera closer to my drawing now that we're starting to add this value. Maybe that will help a little bit. I'm gonna turn my light up too, although that might wash it out. It should come more into focus the more I add to it. I'm going in between the areas where I'm leaving it light, and I'm following those circular contours. So or the spherical contours. I'm following those contour lines that we talked about as I'm adding this, so that it feels like all of these shapes are hugging a sphere, because they are. Okay. So I'm really changing the direction that my pencil is approaching the paper from as I'm adding all these different values. And this was again why I thought that jumbo pencil would be helpful, because it's kind of awkward to hold it straight up and down, and it feels more natural if you change the direction of the way you're holding the pencil, and that can help you get these nice soft lines to happen. And actually, maybe I will just use the jumbo pencil for a lot of this, and then I'll add the darker value in. I think it's easier to keep your value nice and soft, and then it's easier to erase that way as well if you accidentally go into one of the areas where you needed to leave it blank paper. Another tool that would be really helpful for this is an eraser pen or pencil, like the Pentel erasers that are like a little fine point. Can't recall if I put that on the supply list or not. I have one of those in my bag, and it looks like I maybe used it a little bit in the other drawing, so perhaps I did, but I'm not going to use it tonight. I'm just gonna leave the paper blank. Where the light values are. So it's a little exercise in paying attention to where those values are happening. But if you keep it nice and soft on the surface of the paper, then you should be able to erase it easily if you put it somewhere where you don't want it. And then we can always go back in and add more value in the areas where we want it to be darker. And that's where that woodless graphite pencil that came in the same set with the Faber-Castell jumbo pencil would come in handy because it's a little darker. I think it actually is a 6B, the one that comes in that set. Just like the 6B that I'm using here, but since it's that woodless graphite, it's nice and soft as well. So you can go back with that and then darken it up in the areas where it's a little darker. All right, and I'm filling in that circle on that Play-Doh crater there. And then our sea of cold up here, remember, was not very dark. So we'll keep our value nice and soft inside of that one as well. And as you're sketching these and you're looking at the photograph of the moon, obviously there are a lot more shapes and craters and details that we didn't talk about or map out. So feel free to add any of those to your drawing. You are the author of your own story here as you sketch the moon, so feel free to add more details or take more details out. It is definitely a complicated subject matter here. I'm just trying to simplify it as much as I can for us, but you can always simplify it even more. So really, I'm just filling in some nice soft value in all the places where I'm seeing dark shadows in those shapes. And in some areas, I'm drawing little circles where I see there's another little crater where I might want to leave it blank again. And that way I'm just adding the value around it so I can be sure to let the paper shine through and make it feel light in those areas. And you can always erase them back out if you have one of those little fine point erasers, or you can just be mindful and leave the paper blank. I love that comment. Bianca just said, sketching this made me want to study the moon more. And it looks like some folks are agreeing with you, Bianca. Yeah, every time I've taught sketching the moon in person or virtually like this with other groups, people are always really into these lunar maps and looking at the names and everything. It definitely piques a lot of people's interest. And it's so accessible. There's so much accessible information out there. You want to study the moon a little more? Maybe you can set a goal like me to draw and paint 1,000 moons in your lifetime. I really should count how many I've done. There's so many. I mean, I just used to do it a lot more. I used to have a studio space. Well, I still have a studio space here in Austin, but had a gallery and studio space that we called Moon Gallery and Studio. And I created the logo for that business, and It's just a cool little ink painting of the full moon, not unlike the one we're going to do together next week. So this is definitely right up my alley in my artwork. I love to draw and paint the moon. There's so many beautiful quotes out there about the moon. One of my favorites, I don't know who said it, but the moon is for everyone. All right, so just filling in all of this soft value. And I mean, glancing back and forth between my sketch of the moon here and the photograph of the moon, I'm like, not everything's in the perfect spot. There's definitely some information missing. And, you know, there's a few things that are off about it. But when I ignore the photograph and just look at the drawing, I'm like, dang, that's looking amazing. It's looking like the moon. So hopefully you're feeling the same way about yours and you're not judging it too harshly against that photograph, because we're just looking for this visual impact here that resembles the moon enough. And I feel like my sketch is definitely resembling the moon enough. And I'm switching the direction of my pencil quite a bit. Hopefully you're doing the same thing as I'm getting around some of these little lunar mares, because I want to make sure that my value is following those contours. So if you go back and watch that class on understanding 3D forms and contour lines, where we sketched the limes together, I do the same thing. Well, we use pens in that class, but when we start to add the value, we're thinking about the value on all of those contours. So the value needs to follow all of those three-dimensional lines of contours, contour lines. All right, and I've almost got all of the darker shadows filled in, well, the kind of the mid-tone values. And then I'm going to go in and push the absolute dark. So where does it show up almost black? And that's where I'm going to press down a little harder on my pencil, but still keep it nice and soft and still following the contours. And just really push the contrast between these darker values. And that's what's going to really give it some wow factor here. If we just use the same amount of pressure on our value all the way around, then it might not have the same visual impact as pressing down a little harder in these areas where the value is nice and dark. All right, and then same thing all the way around. But I'm aware of the time, so I want to move on to some of these lighter values, like that light gray. So maybe I'm not gonna, I might have to come back to some of this. Let me just get these filled in with some kind of a value, nice and soft. All right, so let's get that really light gray going. So this is where, you know, if I'd started with this, y'all would all be yelling at me. But the 2B pencil, I'm gonna use my smaller 2B here to just sketch in some of these little craters that are showing up. These are all the places where we're gonna leave it blank. So in some of these other craters that we didn't label, but are still pretty prominent and stand out. All right, and then we're gonna go in between those. And like I said, you can always erase these out later with, you could just fill this all in and then nice and soft, and then erase them out with one of those fine point erasers. So I'm gonna go nice and soft in between them and start to fill in this light gray. And again, I'm following the contours. I'm changing the direction of my pencil often. Like I'm not just going in flat here. It's gonna really feel three-dimensional if I follow the three-dimensional curve of this spherical form all the way across. So I'm changing the direction that I'm approaching the paper with my pencil often so that I can get that light gray in between the white areas of the Tycho crater to show up and feel really three-dimensional. And this is going to be really fun whenever we paint it in ink next week, because ink has, we're going to be using white ink for these light areas. So we're going to do a nice little wash of, I'm going to use green. I'm going to encourage y'all to use other colors. Maybe I'll leave, well, no, I put green stuff on the supply list, so I'll use green. I've done blue moons and pink moons so many times, and I was looking up what the full moon in May is referred to as, and it's the flower moon. It's like the movie that was just nominated for Oscars, The Killers of the Flower Moon movie. So anyway, May is the flower moon, and I don't know, I just felt like green was a good color because green is the color that a lot of plants that are blooming in the spring. Well, and also April was the pink moon. So I was like, well, pink feels more like a flower color, but it's also not the pink moon. It's the flower moon. Y'all can use pink next week if you want, but I'm going to use green. Anyway, and then we're going to use the white ink. And so we can add all this white with our white ink. And then we're using a light gray for some of these other areas here, like inside of the space in between the lightest part of the Copernicus crater. We're looking for really light pressure gray there. All right, I'm not going to finish it completely here. I think y'all are probably good on your own. I want to make sure we get this, or you're good on your own to, you know, finish filling all that value in. But I do want to guide you through this background that I added. If you want to add this background, you might just be really happy with how it looks just like this, and you maybe don't want to add the background to it. But I'm going to add the background. And so the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to change the direction. So I'm going to use that jumbo pencil again, because that was the whole point, was to use this jumbo pencil the whole time. The only reason I didn't was because I was afraid my light lines would really not show up for too long. Okay, so with this jumbo pencil, since we have to hold it super far back to hold it comfortably, we're gonna keep it nice and soft, and we're gonna just rotate around here. So I'm changing the way I'm holding the pencil often. and I'm changing the direction that I'm approaching the paper often, just like I've been saying through this whole sketch. So I'm coming at it from the top now, and I'm just getting a nice soft value all the way around. Keeping it super soft right now. I'm not pressing down with my pencil just yet. I'm starting to create a little halo, I guess, around it. And then once I've circled the whole thing, you know, it's okay if my lines are a little not smooth yet. They can, you know, even end up a little straight and like pointed out and around each other, but we want to try to soften and start to create more of a circle around it. And I'm really just using the side of that pencil, keeping it nice and soft. And I'm just going to keep doing that. Just going to keep widening my circle. I'm thinking about my yoga classes that I go to every week. There's a really lovely instructor here in Austin who I've been taking yoga classes with. Singer Mayberry. She's on YouTube. You can find some of her classes, Yoga with Singer. But anyway, we do a lot of little circles with our arms and feet all the time, and then, you know, make the circles bigger. So starting out with our little circles, and then we're making our circles bigger. If you practice yoga, maybe you have a leg up on us here, because it really is about these arm movements. So if you're just still drawing with your wrist, I had a little bit too much of a line there showing up. I want to keep it nice and soft and circular as we go around. So I'm using my whole arm to keep my value nice and soft and circular. And then as I start to widen these circles, it should hopefully start to feel nice and smooth and easy to keep it nice and smooth. So as we get our circles going bigger and bigger, it should be easier, I think, to start to blend it. I'm holding my arm out kind of far away from my drawing paper, and I'm just swiveling that pencil all the way around. I might even turn my paper some other directions so I can continue to do that movement. My camera's in the way of me doing this from too many other angles, but you try it from different angles. See which one gives you the most range of movement here. And if you're having a hard time getting it to soften, it just takes practice. So the more you practice drawing with your whole arm and not just your wrist, the easier it is to get these big movements to happen. And that jumbo pencil can hopefully help you. Loosen up. All right, and then the other thing that I did when I was sketching this other one is as I got out here to the edge, I was like, "Oh, I don't want to fill up this whole paper." I kind of made a little soft rectangle around it, sort of like an old television shape. So I just softened my rectangle. And then I'm just still doing the circular motion to fill in, but once I get to these outer edges, I can start to hug that rectangular shape a little more. And let's see, since we are running out of time, I'm gonna do my cooking show thing and switch to my other one here that's already finished and just show you how, the more I continue to build up that value, the easier it is to softly blend all that together. But you can see how I started out radiating around it in soft circles, and I was probably going a lot slower than I just was just then, and taking my time and keeping it nice and soft and tonal. And then I slowly and lightly got that rectangular shape to happen, and then slowly and lightly blended out to fill in that soft rectangle shape. And then just to like clean it up a little bit, you can go in here closer to the moon itself and make it a little darker there at the edge, because the moon is very light at the edge. A lot of those visible craters are more in the middle, and all the outer edge is pretty light. So it really pops out if we have that dark background. And we're going to add a background with the ink next week as well, and try to keep it nice and smooth and soft like this with our paint brushes. And when it comes to painting it, I'm going to refer back to the way we sketched it tonight, because we're going to paint it in the same way. We're going to have these broad brush strokes that are going to radiate out in a circle around it, and then we're going to soften and try to blend it out to our outer edges. So we're going to do a similar thing when we paint it next week with the ink, using washes and paintbrushes to build up this background. So hopefully you'll sign up for next week's class as well. I'm excited to paint the moon with you, and I will certainly be referring back to sketching the moon in the class next week. So y'all are ready to paint the moon with me. You just need to get some ink. You could also use watercolor or acrylic or gouache or whatever paint that you have. You just want to make sure you've got some kind of white, because if you're using acrylic paint, then the white acrylic can act as the white ink. And if you're using gouache, you should have white gouache. But if you're using watercolor, then you still might want to get some white ink or some white gouache, or maybe even a white gel pen. Well, before y'all run off, if anybody wants to hold up their sketches, I'd love to see some of y'all's sketches of the moon. I know I've seen a few people leave already, but those of you who are still with me, if you want to hold up your sketches, and our moderator can spotlight you. Or I can spotlight some people. Here is Arthur. Oh, that's gorgeous, Arthur. And yeah, feel free to email these to me if you don't post on Facebook or Instagram. Thank you, Arthur, for sending your sketch from last week. I forgot to reply to you, but I love seeing everybody's sketches. And here is Kiara. Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, really nice soft value around the outside of the moon there. And this is my buddy Juan. Oh, that's lovely. That's really nice and contrasty. I got all those dark values in there, Juan. I forgot to mention Draw Club. If any of y'all want to continue drawing with me before next week, I've got a Draw Club on Saturdays. You can follow the link in my link tree on my Instagram to find that. And this is Barbara's. That's lovely, Barbara. Juan is one of my folks who comes to my online draw club, so that's what reminded me to mention it. And here's another one. Oh, that's really nice. Yeah, all those lunar mares are really coming across there. All right, I think that's it. I don't see anybody else holding their sketches up. Thank you all so much for sketching the moon with me. And if I don't see you in my draw club this Saturday morning, you could sign up, like I said, through the link tree on my Instagram at Adrian Hodge Art. Then hopefully I'll see you next week for painting the moon in ink here with Michael's. Thank you all
Thank
and have
you.
a good evening.
Bye.
Good night.